So as a guitar nerd, can you imagine my excitement to find out that there's a video in which Wong interviews Larry Carlton and Mark Lettieri?
What might come from it?
Only heaven knows.
So yeah, I was not disappointed by this video. And immediately after watching it, I sort of jumped on my guitar and I tried to figure out some of the things they were doing. In particular, there was one moment that really caught my attention.
You know, we all have our versions of more harmony to get us, or more things to get us from G to C. Can you show me a few examples and like kind of a progression of how you would approach getting from G to C in an interesting way?
So basically what I'm going to try and do in this video is break down what Larry Carlton and Mark Lettieri play and both show you how it's played and explain some of the music theory concepts behind it. Okay, so we'll start with Larry Carlton. So what he plays is basically something like this. It's really nice. So there are really two music theory concepts at play here. The first is inversions, and the second is voicings. So when we talk about inversions, we're basically just talking about which note is the lowest note in the chord. So if we take a standard meat and potatoes G major triad here, G, B, D, the G doesn't necessarily have to be the lowest note for it still to be a G major triad. We can put the B as the lowest note and still have the same three notes, G, B, and D, with the B as the lowest. And then we get we would either call this a G in first inversion or a G over B or a G slash B, depending on whether you're more jazz or classically inclined. So that's basically inversions. So now if we apply the same concept to notes other than the lowest note of the chord, we start talking about voicings. So for example, in this G major triad, the highest note is the D. But what if we made the B the highest note? Then we get something like this, which is really pretty. Yeah, that's really nice. What was I saying? So when we're talking about voicings, what we're talking about is changing the intervallic relationship inside of the chord. So both these chords are G major in root position, the lowest note's the G, but we change the intervallic relationship between the notes. Here we have a major third followed by minor third. Here we have a perfect fifth followed by a minor sixth. So in this first position, we have what's called a closed voicing. The notes are about as close to each other as they can be intervallically, whereas this is a spread voicing. We have the notes about as far from each other as they can be while remaining within the same octave, or more or less in the same octave. Okay, so let's use these concepts to analyze what Larry Carlton played. We start with a G in second inversion, the D is in the bass, and we're using a spread voicing where this is mainly made up of six. They're quite far away from each other. We move into a C in first inversion, starting on an E, and again, spread voicing. So that's your 1-4, that's your G to C. And what's really cool about it, as Larry Carlton points out, is that if you play it in this position, you can sort of hammer between the notes. So we then move to another 4, another C, this time in root position. We have the C in the bass, always in spread voicings. Here we move to our first 7th chord. It's a D dominant 7 with a C in the bass, and it goes to a G, so we get a 5-1. And we get a G in first inversion, the B is in the bass, and it's a spread voicing. We get a half diminished chord, really just functioning as a passing chord here to get a nice chromatic bass line. To an A minor 7 in a standard root position guitar voicing of an A minor 7. We get another passing chord, this time it's a tritone substitution, an A flat dominant 7, going to a G6. So we get a super nice chromatic bass line here. So really he's starting with the concepts I explained earlier, the spread voicings and the inversions. And then around the half diminished chord, we start getting a more straightforward jazz progression. If you want to know more about tritone substitutions and sort of standard jazz progressions, then you can check out my video on Jacob Collier. Jacob Collier. Cool. I forgot that I had a pick here the whole time. I hope that doesn't make the guitar out of tune, because I can't do it again. So there are different music theory concepts at play in Mark Lettieri's way of going from a 1 to a 4. Let me first play more or less what he plays. It's something like this. Yeah, it's something like that. There's definitely a lot of seconds in these chords though. In fact, it seems to me like his primary goal is to extend the harmony so as to include seconds, which is a very, for lack of a better word, like contemporary jazz approach to harmony. So I just mentioned the term extended harmony. So let's go over that really quickly. If we return to this basic G major triad again, then we can actually add notes to it or extend the harmony. If I add an A, then we get a G major add a 9, because the A is the 9th of the chord. We can also add more than one note. This is a G6. We've added the 6th and the 9th degree in addition to the 3rd and the 5th, or the basic building blocks of the triad. So we see a lot of that in Mark's way of getting from a 1 to a 4. We start with this G, add 4. We've got the C in there, and we've got this nice minor second between the 3rd and the 4th, the B and the D. And then we move to this chord, which is probably supposed to be some sort of C, because we are moving from 1 to 4 in G, so G to C. But it's really only a C in the most liberal sense of the word, because it doesn't have a 3rd or a 5th, which are the notes we use to identify chords using traditional classical and even jazz harmony nomenclature. What we have here is really like a cluster, which is maybe more apparent if I play it that way. But we have a C, we have a B, C, and a D, which is just a diatonic cluster in G major. Yeah, so he's like just playing the extensions there almost. Okay, we then get this chord, which sort of seems like a G6, except we're only playing the top 3 notes. And then we move to this, which is, I would say, a pretty standard C major 9. But he's just playing the top 4 strings of that. And again, we have this really nice second between the C and the D. In this case, it's a major second, but it gives it that nice sort of resonant property. And then we get a pretty straightforward G in first inversion, or a G over B, and we move to a C Lydian chord. We say that it's Lydian because it's got this sharp 4 in there, and sharp 4 with the 5. So again, now we get a minor second again.
That's sick.
Stress like the Lydian sound. Like you can do that. I love Lydian. People don't use it enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that about covers it. I hope that if you were interested in knowing more about the music theory behind what they played, then this video helped you satiate that desire and answered some questions you might have had about what they were doing. It was a really cool video, and yeah, it was very fun to dig into some of the stuff going on in there. So yeah, this is a new format for my channel. Let me know what you think about it, and like and subscribe and all that stuff. And if possible, send me as much money as you can on Patreon. That would be greatly appreciated. Cheers.